This is Fearless Jack, an Appalachian tale. Back some time ago, when folks still had to worry about giants and wild unicorns and such, there was an old woman and her son, Jack. Jack had 2 older brothers, but they were off seeking their fortune. That left Jack to take care of their ma. Well, it got to where they were down to nothing but a penny in a pot. So Jack's ma said, "Jack, honey, oughtn't you go find a job of work before we starve to death?" Jack's ma took the last biscuit in the house and the last little dab of sorghum, packed the sandwich for Jack, and sent him on his way. Jack walked up a few hills and down a few hills till his belly started to rile him. He found a big rock and sat down on it to eat. Pretty soon here come a yellow jacket pestering Jack for his sorghum biscuit. Then come another one, and another. "Who invited y'all to this here picnic?" asked Jack. And he whooshed his hands back and forth, trying to drive off them pesky bees. It didn't do a bit of good. Before he knew it, there was a whole swarm of yellow jackets buzzing over that sandwich. Well, Jack got mad, real mad. He took off his bill cap and brung it down with a mighty whack. Jack started picking dead yellow jackets out of his sandwich. 1, 2, 3, 4. Jack counted up to 10. "Not bad," said he. 10 at a whack." Jack puffed up like a banty rooster. 10 at a whack." Jack whittled a little pointy stick and dipped it in some pokeberry juice and wrote on his bill cap, "Fearless Jack killed 10 at a whack." Then he finished his flattened out sandwich and went down the road. After a while, Jack came to a town. It looked just like a ghost town. Wasn't nobody stirring, hushed up as a graveyard. Then all of a sudden here comes something tearing down the street like a haint in a whirlwind. Jack dove for cover in the nick of time, but not before catching a whiff of the rottenest breath he'd ever smelled. "What in tarnation?" asked Jack as he watched that thing rip-snort its way through town. In a few minutes a feller poked his head out the door. "You still drawing air, son?" "Sure I am," said Jack, dusting himself off. The feller stuck his head out a little further and looked right and then left. Finally he stepped outside. "I'm the high sheriff round these parts. Who might you be?" "Name's Jack." The sheriff looked Jack up and down and up, studied Jack's bill cap. "Says there you killed 10 at a whack." "Yep." You don't look like much. You sure it was 10 you killed, all at one blow?" "Yep, I killed 10 all right. Course, Jack didn't say 10 what." "Well, son, if you're speaking the gospel, though I kindly doubt it, then you're in the right place. We got some wild varmints around here. Been terrorizing the whole county, killing livestock, thrashing crops. Why, folks are scared to come outdoors. Fact is, there's a big reward for the capture of them varmints. I got to warn you, though, plenty braggity britches just like you have had their go. Nary a one has been heard from since." The sheriff sort of snickered at Jack. "But the way I figure it, anybody that could kill 10 men at one whack can surely get shed of a few critters." Jack studied for a bit. "How much reward?" $100 cash money." Jack figured $100 ought to take care of his ma for a while, but he knew right well the difference twixt yellow jackets and wild varmints. So all Jack said was, "I'll see what I can do." Jack went on his way. He decided varmint hunting was a mite too risky. Figured he would just slip on over to the next town and try to stir up a regular job of work there. It might not pay as good, but it was sure to be a sight healthier. Well, no sooner had Jack got out of town than he heard a frightful snorting and snarfling. Looked around, and here come the biggest, most ferocious wild boar he'd ever seen. "Ooh-wee!" Jack flew whippity-split down the holler with that monster hog slicing at the seat of his britches. Jack was in luck. He spied an empty corn crib, and he headed straight for it. He ran inside and climbed up to the top. That old boar was right behind him, but it didn't climb, so it just reared up and started gnashing and slashing, trying to get at Jack. Jack slipped over the top and down the outside of the corn crib. He ran back around to the door, slammed it shut, and wedged it tight. When the old boar figured out what had happened, it took a conniption fit. It charged the door, but the door held. Jack went back to town, strutting and whistling. "Did you see any of them varmints?" asked the sheriff. "Well, I don't know if it counts, but I did come across a little pig shoat," said Jack. "Right cute little rooter, but it got to pestering me, so I grabbed a hold of its tail and slung it in the corn crib. You might ought to take a look just to make sure it ain't one of them varmints." When he saw that boar all pinned up, the sheriff's eyes got big as dinner plates. "Well, fearless Jack, I misjudged you. Didn't really take you for such a mighty hunter, scrap of a lad that you are." Jack got his $100 and started to leave. "Hold on a minute," said the sheriff. "There's another $100 if you can get rid of a nasty grizzly bear that's been plundering the farms around here." "Well, I'll see what I can do," said Jack, but his intention was to go straight home. "I don't need to tangle with no grizzly bear," Jack said to himself. "I'll get myself mauled to death. Besides, $100 is plenty to see me and Ma through winter." Jack never was one to make 2 trips to the creek when one would do. Jack lit on out of town, got about as far as the county line when he started yawning. He saw a great big mossy mound to the side of the road. "I need to catch about 40 winks," said Jack, and he climbed up on top of the mound and went to sleep. Jack had the gall-darndest dream. There was this big as a mountain, mean as a devil, hungry as a goat, grizzly bear, and Jack was astride its humpy old back. Except it wasn't no dream. When Jack come full awake, he was holding on for dear life. That bear was bucking like a carnival ride. It was snarling and slapping its powerful arms every which way trying to get Jack. Finally, the old bear commenced backing up, figuring to pin Jack against the sycamore. Bears don't have eyes in the back of their heads, thank goodness, so the grizzly couldn't see too well where it was going. It missed the sycamore and tumbled rump first into a dry well. Jack sprang onto a tree branch just in time. Grrr! You never heard such a commotion as that grizzly trying to get out of that well. Every time it clawed a few feet up, the stones would give way and it would fall back down to the bottom. Yes, sir, Jack could feel that extra $100 in his pocket already. "Well, Sheriff," said Jack when he got back to town, "'fraid I didn't run into no grizzly, but I did come across a little yelpy cub. I played with it a while, then it wouldn't let me take a nap, so I just swatted it into an old dry well up yonder." "Fearless Jack, you are something," said the sheriff after he got a look at the grizzly. Then he paid Jack his money. "I'd be obliged if you'd take on one more varmint." "How obliged?" said Jack. $300. Jack whistled. "Must be an ornery critter." "You don't know the half of it," said the sheriff. "Remember when you first come through town? That was a wild unicorn that just about ran you over." "You're trifling the truth." "No, sirree. That dad-blasted unicorn has gored about 100 cows and nearly that many sheep and 2 or 3 old ladies to boot." "Well, I'll see what I can do," said Jack. "But it'll cost you $500 cash money." "I reckon that'd be a bargain," the sheriff agreed. Jack had heard tell of unicorns, but he had never come face to face with one. He didn't allow now was the time to make new acquaintances. Old Jack just sauntered out of town and on down the road. Jack hadn't gone too far when he smelled something terrible. At first he couldn't place it. That ain't no polecat, and it ain't no rotten eggs, and ain't no 3-day-old dead fish. By the time Jack figured out what he had smelled, that he had smelled that smell before, it was too late. Up ahead of him stood the wild unicorn, snorting out stinky breath and pawing the earth. It drawed a bead on Jack, pointed its dreadful horn at Jack, and charged. Jack was never one to run to the store when he could get there walking, but if he had to, that boy could burn a cyclone. Right now he figured he had to. Jack lit out with the wild unicorn no more than a frog's hair behind. Jack and the unicorn ran to the middle of town and around the courtyard. "Don't worry, Fearless Jack, I'll save you," yelled the sheriff as he grabbed the .22. As you might suspicion, the sheriff wasn't much of a shot. He pulled the trigger and his first bullet hit the wild blue yonder. He aimed and fired again, and this time it went cattywampus into the dirt. The next bullet hit the church bell, ricocheted, and hit the statue on the court lawn house. Zinged over to the barber pole, rebounded once more, and hit that unicorn smack in the behind. By now, that unicorn had just about wore Jack out, and it was getting ready to gore him good. But getting shot in the behind throwed the unicorn plumb off. It missed Jack altogether and stove its horn into a big oak tree instead, right up to the hilt. That wild unicorn bellowed so loud it started a rock slide on the mountain. But try as it would, it couldn't pull its horn out. Finally, with all that thrashing, the horn broke clean off, and the unicorn, leastways, was what used to be a unicorn, hightailed it out of town like a whipped pup. "Now look what you done," Jack said to the sheriff. "Don't you know unicorns are rare as hen's teeth? Probably not more than a handful in the whole wide world. If I wanted to, I could have killed that critter back there in the woods, but I was aiming to join the circus with it. I just about had it wore down to where I could ride it when you started shooting and messing things up." "Well, I'm powerful sorry, Fearless Jack," said the sheriff. "Reckon you ought to pay me double to make up for the lost revenue." The sheriff thought a minute. "Guess it's the least I can do," he agreed. Jack collected his $1,000. He couldn't wait to show his ma how rich they were. As Jack was leaving, the sheriff hollered after him, "Hey, Fearless Jack, don't guess a feller like you needs to worry about that settlement of giants on t'other side of the mountain." "Giants?" asked Jack. The end.